So the trio end up in some woods. In fact, according to Hermione, they're the woods where the Quidditch World Cup was held. We see that Ron was splinched during the apparition, and it does seem a bit censored compared to how it's described in the book, where his entire left side is covered in blood. That's a nitpick, though. After Hermione uses Dittany to fix him up a bit, she explains to Harry what happened with Yaxley and that they can't go back to Grimmauld Place. In the book, Harry says it was his fault and shows Hermione Moody's eye, which he took from Umbridge's office door. After Ron wakes up, they decide to stay here for now, and Hermione casts protective spells around them as Harry gets the tent out of Hermione's bag. There's a moment in the book here where Hermione starts to say Voldemort's name, but Ron panics and stops her. Not wanting to argue with Ron in this state, Harry and Hermione let it go, but it becomes an ongoing thing where Ron is even more scared of the name than usual, and even Harry and Hermione fall into the habit of saying you-know-who. It turns out Ron's paranoia actually saved them here, as saying Voldemort's name is what allows the Death Eaters to track them. This is never explained in the movie, except in a deleted scene that happens right at this point.
Don't say it. It's taboo, you know whose name. That's how they track people now.
How do you know that?
I overheard some bloke at the ministry talking about it.
In the book, they don't find out about this until later, but honestly, I think it works a bit better if they learn it here and consciously decide to stop using the name so as not to attract Death Eaters. I always found it a bit odd and convenient in the book how Harry especially slipped into the habit of not saying the name. It also makes sense that Ron would hear it from people in the ministry. There is another part of this deleted scene, however, that makes less sense in the context of the movies, where Harry and Hermione are discussing the Horcruxes.
Well, Dumbledore had a theory that the Horcruxes wouldn't be made out of random objects, and they wouldn't be hidden randomly either. We know of 3 so far. The ring, which according to Dumbledore belonged to Tom's grandfather, the diary, which obviously belonged to Tom himself, and then this, which again, according to Dumbledore, belonged to Tom's mother.
Yeah, except none of that is true. At least in the movies. Dumbledore never said the locket belonged to Tom's mother. It was the ring he said belonged to his mother, not his grandfather, as Harry says here. And Dumbledore never said in the movie that the Horcruxes wouldn't be everyday objects. In fact, he actually said...
Could be anything. Most commonplace of objects.
Everything Harry's saying here is stuff Dumbledore said in the book, not the movie. Then again, this is a deleted scene, so no sense going on about it. In the book, Ron starts to worry about the Cattermoles, since they were the only ones who they didn't see escape, and Hermione seems to love this. Hermione was watching Ron fret over the fate of the Cattermoles, and there was such tenderness in her expression that Harry felt almost as if he had surprised her in the act of kissing him. They then start to examine the Horcrux. Unlike in the movie, they don't use a bunch of spells to try to destroy it, because they already discussed back in the Burrow that won't work. They work out that they'll have to open it before they can destroy it, but can't figure out how to open it. Ron brings up a decent point in the movie.
Dumbledore sends you off to find all these Horcruxes, but doesn't tell you how to destroy them.
This is something Harry dwells on a lot throughout the book, especially as he learns more about Dumbledore's past. The trio take it in turns to keep watch and to wear the Horcrux, which is gradually chipping away at their spirit as they wear it and enhancing their negative emotions. The movie does a good job demonstrating this pretty much right away.
Don't. It comforts him.
It sets my teeth on edge. What's he expecting to hear? Good news?
I'm doing everything I can.
You're not doing enough!
Better?
Right.
Incidentally, unlike in the movie, the trio don't have a radio with them right now. They won't until quite a bit later. In fact, if you listen to the radio in the background, it mentions the death of a goblin named Gornock along with the names Cresswell and Tonks, and also mentions the disappearance of Dean Thomas. This is a broadcast the trio hear much later in the book, and is connected to something they will see shortly. In the book, the trio decide what to do about Kreacher. They're worried about him now that Yaxley has gained access to Grimmauld Place, but ultimately decide against trying to summon him in case Yaxley or another Death Eater comes with him. Harry's scar burns again, and he has the vision of Voldemort interrogating Gregorovitch and demanding he give him something. He reads Gregorovitch's mind and sees, in the past, a young man stealing said item from Gregorovitch's workshop. When Gregorovitch claims to have no idea who the young man was, Voldemort kills him. Hermione wakes Harry up and tells him off again for allowing himself to see these things. Unlike in the movie, she refuses to listen when Harry begins to tell her what he saw and sends Harry back into the tent, so Harry tells Ron instead. He mentions that the thief looked familiar, but he can't place where. Of course, as we later learn, the thief was a young Gellert Grindelwald, and the item he stole, and that Voldemort is now after, was the Elder Wand. The movie follows this with a rather chilling scene that wasn't in the book, where a group of Snatchers almost find the trio as they smell Hermione's perfume, but thanks to the enchantments, they ultimately don't detect them. Meanwhile, in the tent, Harry hears the news on the radio about Snape being the new headmaster at Hogwarts, something they read about back in Grimmauld Place in the book, and watches him on the Marauders' map. As he goes out to join Hermione, she tells him about the encounter with the Snatchers, and they return to the tent, leading to this moment.
And next time, Hermione, as much as I like your perfume, just don't wear any.
Obviously, Ron's starting to get jealous. I'll get back to this in a bit. The next morning, in the book, Harry buries Moody's eye under the most gnarled and resilient-looking tree he could find, and carves a small cross into it. A sort of honorary makeshift burial, since they couldn't find his body. Over the next while, the trio journey from place to place, trying to find the Horcruxes and looking in places significant to Voldemort. They check out the ruin of the orphanage that he grew up in, but find nothing. As Harry says, Voldemort hated that place, so there's no way he would hide a Horcrux there. They consider Borgin and Burke, since Voldemort worked there for a time, but as Harry points out, Borgin and Burke, being experts on dark stuff, would have recognized a Horcrux. They also consider Albania, where Voldemort spent his time in spectral exile after losing his body, but since he already had 5 Horcruxes by then, and Nagini was the 6th, that's ruled out. Finally, there's Hogwarts, which Harry thinks is a likely possibility, but Ron and Hermione don't, since he wouldn't have had a chance given that he was turned away immediately when he went back there for a job. Not to mention, it's just too dangerous to go back there right now. Throughout their journey, tensions rise and conflicts spark up between the three of them. This mostly happens when they have nothing to eat, which is often, since as Hermione explains, food can't be conjured by magic. It can be summoned or transformed, but not just made to appear out of nothing. Ron is the one who takes all of this the worst. Having lived with the Dursleys, Harry is used to being starved, and Hermione, well, I guess she's not used to being consistently fed delicious meals daily to the same extent as Ron. Ron's temper probably also isn't helped by the fact that unlike Harry and Hermione, his family is still in danger, whereas theirs have both been hidden away, something he comments on later in his huge outburst. After all, the three of them are completely isolated right now. They have no idea what's going on in the rest of the world. For all Ron knows, his family could be dead. While Ron takes it the worst, though, it's not like Harry and Hermione keep it together perfectly either. Both of them are quick to rise to Ron's bait, and Harry, often noticing Ron and Hermione whispering behind his back, starts to wonder if they had only agreed to come because they had thought he had some grand plan he hadn't originally shared with them. And of course, all of these negative emotions are only enhanced in each of them when it's their turn to wear the Horcrux. In the movie, jealousy is also added to Ron's reasons for being angry, as we keep seeing him glaring at Harry and Hermione, who are together and separate from him. I don't think this was really necessary, and it comes across like one of those annoying romantic misunderstandings you see way too often in movies. I will say this, there is something pretty chilling about hearing a constant stream of names of people who've died all throughout this montage, especially since it started with this.
Thankfully, the list is short today.
Yeah, real short. So after all of this, Harry and Hermione figure out that the Sword of Gryffindor can be used to destroy Horcruxes. In the movie, Hermione just kind of figures it out.
In the Chamber of Secrets, you stabbed the basilisk with the Sword of Gryffindor. Its blade is impregnated with basilisk venom.
It only takes in that which makes it stronger.
Exactly, which is why...
It can destroy Horcruxes.
In the book, however, it's a little more complicated. After Ron and Hermione get into a heated argument, Harry suddenly hears faint voices and alerts the other two. They use extendable ears to listen in. The voices turn out to belong to a group of 5 fugitives, 3 wizards and 2 goblins. The goblins are named Griphook and Gornog. The wizards include Dirk Cresswell, an ex-Ministry member who was exposed as a Muggle-born, Tonks' father, Ted, and the trio's fellow Gryffindor classmate, Dean Thomas. They all talk a bit about how they escaped from the Ministry. Funny enough, Dirk mentions that he stunned Dawlish to get away. That guy really can't catch a break. The two goblins explain that Gringotts has been taken over by the Death Eaters, and refusing to serve wizards, they fled. Griphook then mentions how he got some small revenge as he left by not informing the Death Eaters that the Sword of Gryffindor in the bank was a fake. Naturally, Ted and Dean are completely confused by this statement, and Dirk explains to them that he heard from Griphook, who heard it from Bill Weasley, who works at the bank, that 3 students, including Bill's younger sister, Ginny, tried to steal Gryffindor's sword from the headmaster's office, but Snape caught them and had the sword sent to Gringotts, apparently not knowing it was fake. He knew, of course. Griphook recognized that it was a fake because it was clearly wizard-made, whereas the original was goblin-made, but didn't tell the Death Eaters. So yeah, in the book, this is how the trio learn that the sword is missing and not in the headmaster's office. As I mentioned earlier, I've always found it way too convenient. I mean, all the stars would have to align for this group to pass close enough to the trio for them to listen in on the conversation, and for them to talk about a story only tangentially related to what they were already talking about, but which was exactly what the trio needed to hear just then. Simply having Scrimgeour say,
"The sword is missing,"
is so much simpler and more believable. The group continue talking again as Dean asks after Ginny and the others, to which the goblins reply that they were punished but received no lasting injuries. Ted responds to this with, "Weasleys don't need any more of their kids injured, do they?" Which only increases Ron's fear and anger. They then start talking about Harry Potter and the things the Prophet is saying about him. Dirk seems to have doubts that Harry really is the chosen one, given how no one's seen him in so long, but Dean stands up for him and says he believes in Harry, which I think is really good of him, considering Harry kind of stole his girl in the last book. Ted recommends Dirk read the Quibbler instead, as that has ironically become far more truthful than the Daily Prophet these days, and has consistently shown support for Harry. After they finish talking, the trio reel in the extendable ears, and Hermione quickly goes to grab Phineas Nigellus' portrait, which is still in her handbag, so they can ask him about what happened to Ginny and the others, and what happened to the sword. As soon as he enters the frame, Hermione immediately uses a spell that blindfolds him so he can't see where they are and report it to Snape, though of course it would have been a good thing if he had. Despite his anger at being blindfolded, hearing Harry's voice intrigues Phineas and stops him from leaving immediately. They first ask him about how Ginny and the others were punished for trying to steal the sword, and in addition to confirming that Neville and Luna were the other two who tried to steal it, he tells them that Snape punished them by sending them to do some work in the Forbidden Forest with Hagrid. Harry is relieved by this, as he had expected much worse. And Snape might have thought that was a punishment, but Ginny, Neville, and Luna probably had a good laugh with Hagrid. The Forbidden Forest. They faced plenty worse than the Forbidden Forest. Big deal. Of course, Snape did know that that wasn't much of a punishment, which is why he did it. I should also mention that this relieved, nonchalant reaction to Ginny's fate is another thing that adds to Ron's anger towards Harry. Hermione, trying to get information on when the sword might have been switched with a fake, asks if it had been taken away for cleaning or something, to which Phineas snidely replies that goblin-made materials don't require cleaning, as they absorb only those things that strengthen them. Throughout this whole conversation, Phineas has insulted Ginny, Neville, Luna, Hagrid, and Hermione, and tired of the trio contradicting him on those insults, he begins to leave the portrait. But they do manage to get one last bit of info out of him. That the last time he saw the sword out of its case was when Dumbledore used it to destroy a ring. This is when the trio realize that the sword can destroy Horcruxes and that Dumbledore must have swapped it for a fake because he knew the Ministry wouldn't allow it to be passed on. I don't really have any problems with how this scene was done in the movie. Simply having Hermione already know about goblin-made materials and figuring it out from there, rather than having to be told it all by Phineas, does make sense, even if her realization is a bit sudden. But again, more believable than the coincidence of them overhearing that conversation. My only issues are, A, not learning about Ginny being sent into the forest takes away another layer from Ron's anger at Harry, and B, the absence of Phineas's portrait in Hermione's handbag does create a bit of a plot hole, or at least an unanswered question, later in the movie. So Harry and Hermione, feeling hopeful again now that they know about the sword, start theorizing about where it is, as it would have to be somewhere Dumbledore knew they would think to look, but no one else would. Harry suggests the Shrieking Shack, though as Hermione points out, Snape can get in there. Harry reminds her that Dumbledore trusted Snape, but she points out that he didn't trust him enough to tell him he'd switch the swords. This cheers Harry up even more, knowing that Dumbledore hadn't completely trusted Snape after all. Little does he know. The two of them then turn to Ron for his input, and this is where the fight happens. Unlike the two of them, he's not excited by what they learned. To him, this is just another thing they've got to find. Then Ron starts unloading all the negative feelings he's been bottling up this whole time, exacerbated by the Horcrux around his neck, of course.
I just thought, after all this time, we would have actually achieved something. I thought you knew what you were doing. I thought Dumbledore would have told you something worthwhile. I thought you had a plan.
I told you everything Dumbledore told me. And in case you haven't noticed, we have found a Horcrux already.
Yeah, and we're about as close to getting rid of it as we are to finding the rest of them, aren't we?
This first part is pretty much in line with the book, at least in terms of what Ron is saying. He's upset that Harry didn't have more to go on. Both he and Hermione agreed to leave their families behind to come risk their lives on this journey with Harry, and Harry's lack of solid leadership feels like a betrayal to him. The movie does get this across, I think. My issue here is less with Ron's portrayal and more with Harry's. Compared to the book, Harry, while he is clearly angry at Ron, seems much more subdued. In the book, he actually seems to want an argument with Ron, having become fed up with his attitude over their journey, and shoots down all of Hermione's attempts to calm them both down. Like when she asks Ron to take off the Horcrux.
Please take the Horcrux. You wouldn't be saying any of this if you hadn't been wearing it all day.
In the book, Harry actually denies Hermione's claim here, saying that he saw the two of them talking behind his back, and his internal narration even says that he doesn't want any excuses made for Ron. So while Ron is the one who started the argument, Harry does perpetuate it rather than try to calm him down. In addition, when Hermione denies that she and Ron were expressing their doubts in Harry, Ron calls her out. Harry, we weren't. Don't lie. You said it too. You said you were disappointed. You said you thought he had a bit more to go on than. I didn't say it like that, Harry. I didn't. Now, I do believe that Ron is probably making it sound a bit worse than it was, but my point is, Hermione isn't even called out in the movie. In fact, look at these lines here. We thought you knew what you were doing. We thought Dumbledore told you what to do. We thought you had a real plan. Now listen to them in the movie.
I thought you knew what you were doing. I thought Dumbledore would have told you something worthwhile. I thought you had a plan.
He said I, not we. In addition to portraying Harry as far more reasonable, the movie is also absolving Hermione of any doubt she may have in Harry. And that's not to say that those doubts are unreasonable, just that it wasn't only Ron who had them. In short, the movie makes this all Ron's fault. And yeah, it mostly is, but it's not as one-sided as the movie makes it seem. It also doesn't help that the movie focused a lot on Ron's misguided jealousy over Harry and Hermione, making his anger seem much more petty. And then we come to the second half of the argument, where Ron vents all of his anger over his concern for his family.
Do you know why I listen to that radio every night, dear? To make sure I don't hear Ginny's name. Or Fred, or George, or Mum.
I'm glad the movie included this, but again, a layer of this is removed thanks to the previously cut content. In the book, Ron is angry that Harry isn't more concerned about his family. They just learned that Ginny was sent into the Forbidden Forest, and Harry brushed that off like it was nothing, despite the fact that she was his girlfriend. Then there's what they heard Ted Tonks say. Weasleys don't need any more of their kids injured, do they? Ron lashes out at both of the other two over this, for not even thinking about what it might mean. Hermione points out that he could just be referring to the injuries they already know about, like Bill's face, George's ear, and Ron's illness. But of course, Ron can't just choose to believe that, not unlike how Harry can't just choose to believe what he wants about Dumbledore, despite everyone telling him to.
Stop preaching facts to me! It's not what I need!
Again, all of these layers to Ron's anger are cut from the movie. And then there's this infamous line.
You think I don't know how this feels? Oh, you don't know how it feels! Your parents are dead! You have no family!
Yeah, jeez. That is going way too far. Ron would never say that. Okay, yeah, he's got the Horcrux on, but he did in the book as well, and he never said anything that horrible. Ron does consider Harry part of his family, and Harry cares about them almost as much, if not as much, as he does. Here's how it goes in the book. It's alright for you two, isn't it, with your parents safely out of the way? My parents are dead, and mine could be going the same way. Again, Ron isn't being reasonable, but what he's saying isn't wrong. He doesn't try to imply that Harry isn't part of his family. So Ron storms out, leaving the Horcrux behind and asking if Hermione's coming with him, but she decides to stay with Harry. In both versions, Ron, probably thanks to residuals of the Horcrux, takes this as a rejection. Hermione chases after him, but he disapparates away. So yeah, pretty rough. As if the trio weren't in a bad enough spot already, now they've lost Ron. As I said, I'm not a big fan of the way the movie handled this. Again, I'm not trying to say it wasn't Ron's fault in the book, it was. But the movie definitely seemed to want to make Harry less flawed because protagonist. The next day, Harry and Hermione are thoroughly depressed and can hardly even speak to each other. They deliberately stall the packing to give Ron time to return to them, but eventually they have to face the fact that he's not coming back, and they disapparate to a different location. In the movie, we then of course have that dancing scene with Harry and Hermione. This was not in the book, and in all honesty, I don't hate it. Both of them are at their lowest point, but Hermione especially. Harry recognizes this, and being the hero, he goes to cheer her up. Like Dumbledore said back in Prisoner of Azkaban.
Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light.
And while they're dancing, it seems to work. Unfortunately, once the music stops, the sadness and depression returns. But even for a brief moment, Harry was able to give her and himself a faint ray of light. And there's no romantic tension here at all. I think both of them are pretty clear on their relationship and where they stand. So, I think technically everything about this scene works. That said, I'd be lying if I said I couldn't do without it. While I like the intention behind it, it is ultimately unnecessary. It's also another difference between book Harry and movie Harry, and I'm not necessarily saying that's a positive or a negative. I don't think book Harry would ever do something like this. Not that he wouldn't want to cheer Hermione up, but I don't think he would have any idea what to do, and he certainly wouldn't dance. I guess in a way I do like seeing him take action like this, as I feel like the movies usually tended to make him less proactive than the books. So days and days pass as the two of them continue to sink deeper into hopelessness and depression. Harry often hears Hermione cry when she thinks he's asleep. He's taken to watching the Marauders map to see what's going on at Hogwarts and if Ron's going to show up there. They try to think of possible places where Dumbledore could have hidden the sword, but their ideas get more and more far-fetched. Harry even starts to agree with what Ron said. Dumbledore had left him with virtually nothing, and he feels stupid for allowing Ron and Hermione to accompany him when he has no idea what he's doing. They sometimes bring out Phineas Nigellus' portrait just so they can have a bit of extra company, even if his isn't the most pleasant. And also to question him about the goings-on at Hogwarts. They learn from him that the students have been rebelling against Snape's regime, and that Snape has banned gatherings of students, and also banned Ginny from going to Hogsmeade. In hindsight, this was likely a measure taken to protect her so she wouldn't get caught in the village and used as a hostage. Phineas seems to idolize Snape since he's the first Slytherin headmaster since himself, and speaks very highly of him. Phineas sometimes questions Harry about his whereabouts, at which the two of them immediately stuff him back into the bag. One day, as Christmas draws near, Harry decides to suggest they go to Godric's Hollow again, as it seems like the only place they haven't explored yet. Incidentally, this is also in the movie where Harry touches the snitch to his lips and sees the word scribbled on it, something they discovered way back at the Burrow in the book. Before Harry can suggest Godric's Hollow, Hermione shows him a symbol drawn in the book Dumbledore left her.
Somebody inked it in. It isn't part of the book. Somebody drew it.
Luna's dad was wearing that at Bill and Fleur's wedding.
Why would someone draw it in a children's book?
In the book, Harry explains to her what Krum said about it being Grindelwald's mark, which confuses Hermione because nothing she read about Grindelwald ever mentioned him having a mark, and if that's really what it is, why didn't Scrimgeour recognize it when he examined the book? So after that, Harry suggests they go to Godric's Hollow, and to his surprise, Hermione agrees, saying the Sword of Gryffindor is most likely there, as it's somewhere Dumbledore would have known Harry would want to go, and it's Godric Gryffindor's birthplace. Though he doesn't admit it to Hermione, Harry didn't think about that at all. He just wants to go to see the ruin of his old house and his parents' graves, and to talk to Bathilda Bagshot about Dumbledore. Harry actually gets slightly manipulative here in the book. After Harry tells Hermione that Bathilda Bagshot lives in Godric's Hollow, she suddenly thinks Dumbledore might have given Bathilda the sword. Harry actually doubts this, given Bathilda's age and the fact that Dumbledore never told Harry he knew her. But he doesn't share those doubts with Hermione because she's finally agreeing to go to Godric's Hollow like he wanted. The prospect of going to Godric's Hollow actually makes Harry pretty emotional in the book, as he imagines the life he might have had there had Voldemort not killed his parents. He was about to go home, about to return to the place where he had had a family. It was in Godric's Hollow that, but for Voldemort, he would have grown up and spent every school holiday. He could have invited friends to his house. He might even have had brothers and sisters. It would have been his mother who had made his 17th birthday cake. The life he had lost had hardly ever seemed so real to him as at this moment when he knew he was about to see the place where it had been stolen from him. A week later, after they've prepared their disguises, the two of them finally disapparate to Godric's Hollow. Now, in the movie, when they arrive, they have this little exchange.
I still think we should have used Polyjuice Potion.
No. This is where I was born. I'm not returning as someone else.
This is a reference to the book where they do actually use Polyjuice Potion to disguise themselves as a middle-aged muggle couple. While it does make sense for them to be cautious, I can't say I blame the filmmakers for wanting to use Dan and Emma here, rather than replacing them with other random actors. It worked well for the Ministry of Magic sequence, but there was really no way around it there. Between the snow, the decorations, the music coming from the pub, and the carols coming from the church, Harry and Hermione realize it must be Christmas Eve. Being on the run for so long, they completely lost track of the date. The two of them go to the church graveyard to look for Harry's parents' grave. I think this scene was done well in the movie. Hermione first finds a grave belonging to an Ignotus Peverell, which has the same symbol from the book on it, and the grave is dated long before Grindelwald came along, so the symbol can't be Grindelwald's. And then, well, I'll just let the scene play. I think that scene was really well done. It gets across exactly how Harry's feeling without any words, and I like the addition of the two of them saying Merry Christmas to each other. The movie does leave a couple things out, like the words on the Potters' graves. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. Harry worries a bit when he reads this, as it sounds like a Death Eater ideal. As Hermione explains, though, it's talking about living beyond death, not avoiding death. There's also a statue of James and Lily holding baby Harry in the village square that just looks like a war memorial to the Muggles, showing again how well respected Harry's parents were in the magical community. Finally, Harry and Hermione also find the graves of Kendra and Ariana Dumbledore, Albus's mother and sister, with the words, "Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Upon seeing this, Harry realizes Rita and Muriel did get some facts right, and wonders why Dumbledore never shared this with him. They could have visited together and really bonded over this. So after visiting the graves, Harry and Hermione spot someone watching them. In the movie, Harry realizes who it is right away and they follow her. In the book, they quickly leave the graveyard, put on the invisibility cloak, and while searching for Bathilda Bagshot's house, they come across the ruin of the house where Harry's parents were murdered. When Harry touches the gate, a sign magically appears reading, "On this spot, on the night of October 31st, 1981, Lily and James Potter lost their lives. Their son, Harry, remains the only wizard ever to have survived the killing curse. This house, invisible to Muggles, has been left in its ruined state as a monument to the Potters, and as a reminder of the violence that tore apart their family." And around that are several bits of graffiti where people who visited the site signed their name or initials, or some even wrote messages to Harry. Hermione doesn't seem to like that they vandalized it, but Harry himself loves it. This is when they see Bathilda Bagshot approaching them. She doesn't say a word, but merely beckons them towards her. And keep in mind, not only are Harry and Hermione disguised as Muggles, but they're under the invisibility cloak, and yet Bathilda is perfectly able to see and recognize them. Of course, I imagine the fact that they were just standing over Harry's parents' graves probably helps. Despite how unsettling the situation is, Harry and Hermione decide to follow her after they confirm her identity. And it may seem like they're being a bit too trusting here, but keep in mind, this is someone who was very famous and who knew Dumbledore, and not to mention is said to be pretty senile. Basically, this is someone who they know is not a Death Eater. Plus, as Harry points out, they can probably take her in a fight if they have to. The dark magic Voldemort used here was beyond anything they could have imagined. All this to say, I don't blame them for falling into this trap. They follow Bathilda into her house, and there's a definite unsettling feeling about this whole sequence. The movie captured it really well, between the dark atmosphere of the house and just Bathilda's overall presence and the way she just keeps staring at them without talking. The casting for her was really good. There are a few hints that she's not entirely what she seems. The fact that she's not using magic, the bad smell surrounding her, because she's a possessed corpse, and as I mentioned, the fact that she doesn't talk. Harry chalks these things up to her having gone senile in her old age, like Muriel said. There's also the fact that the locket around Harry's neck keeps pulsing around her, because it recognizes another piece of Voldemort's soul. Harry thinks this is because it senses the sword nearby, which can destroy it. And finally, in the book, this isn't a hint to us or to Harry, Bathilda in the next room calls for them to follow her. The one time she actually does speak. To us and Harry, this sounds perfectly normal. Hermione, however, jumps in fear when she hears it, and in hindsight, we know why. Bathilda, or rather Nagini, was speaking Parseltongue, so all Hermione heard was a frightening hissing sound. Harry, however, heard her in plain English, and because this is told from his point of view, that's how it reads on the page as well. Harry finds several pictures in the house, including one he recognizes, the thief who stole from Gregorovitch. He suddenly remembers where he's seen him before, laughing with the young Dumbledore in that photo in Rita Skeeter's book. He questions Bathilda about him, but she doesn't answer. In the movie, she simply goes upstairs, but in the book, she wordlessly gestures for Harry to follow her up, while making it clear she wants to talk to him alone. Now maybe this is just me, but I feel like Harry comes across more naive and foolish in the movie. In the book, he and Hermione talk it over first. He suggests that Dumbledore may have told Bathilda to give the sword to Harry alone, and ultimately Hermione agrees to wait downstairs, albeit somewhat reluctantly. In the movie, Harry just wordlessly follows Bathilda without even consulting Hermione. It also doesn't help that in the movie, Harry was the one who suggested Bathilda may have the sword and that they follow her home, whereas in the book, Hermione was the one who thought she might have it, and Harry actually somewhat doubted it at first. Granted, when they do finally meet her, Hermione does seem a bit more doubtful than him, but she still agrees to go along. It's only when she hears the Parseltongue that she really seems to start doubting this. In any event, Harry follows Bathilda upstairs where she starts talking to him. Again, in the book, because this is from Harry's point of view, it reads as plain English. However, because the movie is third person, we hear it for what it really is, Parseltongue. I kind of like that change based on the point of view. In the book, Bathilda closes her eyes and Harry feels Voldemort's joy. Nagini has contacted him, telling him she has Harry. She points Harry to a desk in the corner, and as he turns away from her, she transforms. The effect here in the movie is great. The way her skin decays is really unsettling. My one problem with it is we don't see any trace of Bathilda's corpse after Nagini reveals her true form, making it seem like Nagini had simply taken on her form. But no, it's far more disturbing in the book. Nagini was actually possessing Bathilda's dead corpse, and as she leaves through the neck, the remains of the body fall to the floor behind her. I don't have a ton to say about this fight itself. It's pretty self-explanatory, and I think the movie did it really well. There is one thing the movie left out, however. Because Nagini signaled Voldemort, Voldemort is flying their way while they're fighting Nagini, and Harry keeps getting glimpses through his eyes. In fact, Voldemort makes it to the house just as they begin to disapparate, and it's through his eyes that we see them get away. Harry feels Voldemort's rage over Harry having escaped from him in Godric's Hollow a second time, and then we actually see the night of Harry's parents' death from Voldemort's point of view as he reminisces on it, and Harry is still in his head. This is our first time actually seeing what happened rather than simply hearing it or being told. Of course, it's from Voldemort's point of view, so it's very condescending towards the Potters, but we do see a couple interesting things we didn't know before. First of all, James didn't even have his wand with him when he confronted Voldemort to give Lily time to get away. Also, Voldemort really had intended to spare Lily if she didn't get in the way and gave her the chance to stand aside, but when she refused, he killed her anyway. This is why Lily's sacrifice protected Harry and not James's. Voldemort was always going to kill James, whereas Lily had a chance to live, but chose to stand between Voldemort and her son regardless. And as we learn at the end of the book, the reason Voldemort was initially going to spare Lily was as a reward for Snape, for informing him of the prophecy. We also see that Harry didn't initially cry upon seeing his mother killed. It's actually pretty sad.
The child had not cried all this time. He could stand clutching the bars of his cot, and he looked up into the intruder's face with a kind of bright interest, perhaps thinking that it was his father who hid beneath the cloak, making more pretty lights, and his mother would pop up any moment laughing.
It's only when the baby sees that it's not James that he starts to cry. There's also a rather disturbing moment earlier in the memory as he's on his way to the Potter's house.
"Nice costume, mister." He saw the boy's smile falter as he ran near enough to see beneath the cloak, saw the fear cloud his painted face. Then the child turned and ran away. Beneath the robe, he fingered the handle of his wand. One simple movement, and the child would never reach his mother. But unnecessary. Quite unnecessary.
If Voldemort wasn't so worried about alerting the Potters that he was on his way, that kid would never have made it home. So after this trip down memory lane reaches the spell that backfired on him, Voldemort snaps back to the present in Bathilda Bagshot's bedroom, where he finds the picture of the thief he saw in Gregorovich's memories. Harry snaps back to himself as he regains consciousness back in the tent. According to Hermione, several hours had passed since their encounter with Nagini. Harry's in pretty bad shape. There's a mark on his chest where the locket pressed into it, and Hermione had to use a severing charm to get it off. He was also bit by Nagini, but Hermione cleaned the wound and put Dittany on it. Harry apologizes for leading them on that wild goose chase for nothing, but as Hermione reminds him, she wanted to go to Godric's Hollow as well. Harry then tells Hermione everything that happened after Bathilda brought him upstairs. He works out that the reason Bathilda didn't speak in front of Hermione was because it was all Parseltongue, and that she must have died a while ago, and Nagini had possessed her corpse. Voldemort had stationed her there knowing Harry was likely to go back. Harry then learns some horrible news.
Where is my wand? Where's my wand, Hermione?
As we were leaving Godric's Hollow, I cast a curse and it rebounded.
After 6.5 years, Harry's wand is done. And with Ollivander kidnapped and Gregorovitch dead, he has no chance of repairing it or getting a new one. Too defeated to feel anything anymore, Harry asks to borrow Hermione's wand while he keeps watch, just wanting to be alone. In the book, thanks to his internal narration, we really get a sense of how utterly defeated Harry feels right now. It seemed like Harry had hit his lowest point before, but no. Now, not only has he lost Ron, but he's lost his wand, the source of most of his magical power, and with it, the protection of the twin cores. He feels more fatally weakened by this than any of his physical injuries in the past. And on top of that, they've now completely run out of leads. And of course, there's Harry's recently developed doubts about Dumbledore, which really come to the forefront of Harry's mind here, as he furiously dwells on how little Dumbledore left him to go on. And it's about to get even worse. Hermione comes out to join Harry and shows him a book she found in Bathilda Bagshot's house. It's The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore, Rita Skeeter's book. Apparently she had sent Bathilda an advance copy as thanks for the answers she gave her. Hermione gives Harry the book so he can find out who the man in that picture was, and he does so. First, though, Hermione asks Harry if he's still mad at her, since it was her spell that broke his wand. He doesn't blame her, though. As he says, he would have been dead if Hermione hadn't come to help him. So Harry looks in the book and finds the picture of young Dumbledore laughing together with the mysterious thief, who, according to the caption, is none other than Gellert Grindelwald. Both Harry and Hermione are naturally shocked and horrified to learn that Dumbledore and Grindelwald were friends. At least in the book.
You wanted to know who the boy in the photograph was? Gellert Grindelwald.
It's the thief I saw in Gregorovich's wand shop.
Yep, that's all we get in the movie, which is so weird. It doesn't explain anything about him. They act like he's just some random guy they've never heard of before. He's only the second most famous dark wizard of all time, if not the most famous, yet the name seems to mean nothing to them. In the book, after discovering this shocking truth, the two of them begin reading from the start of the chapter. It starts by talking about how Dumbledore had to abandon his plans to travel the world with Elphias Doge after learning of his mother's death and return to his home. Apparently, Dumbledore continued Kendra's imprisonment, as Rita calls it, of his sister Ariana, who only a few people, such as Doge and Bathilda Bagshot, knew even existed. Rita admits she used Veritaserum to get information out of Bathilda. Is that legal? For the most part, Bathilda simply repeated the stories she had been told by Albus and Aberforth, like that Kendra died due to a backfiring charm, or that Ariana had to be kept out of public because she was frail and delicate. But there was one big secret Bathilda did reveal to Rita: Dumbledore's friendship with Grindelwald, who was also Bathilda's great-nephew. Rita explains a bit about Grindelwald's childhood. He attended Durmstrang and proved himself to be as brilliant and talented as Dumbledore. However, he was thrown out of Durmstrang due to some twisted experiments he performed with dark magic. Which raises the question, just how twisted were these experiments to get him thrown out of Durmstrang? Grindelwald then went to visit his great-aunt, who introduced him to Albus, who was feeling lonely having to take care of Ariana, and the two became friends almost immediately. Rita reveals a letter that Albus had written to Grindelwald during their time as friends. Apparently Bathilda had it and showed it to Rita. I'll just read out what it says.
Gellert, your point about wizard dominance being for the Muggles' own good. This, I think, is the crucial point. Yes, we have been given power, and yes, that power gives us the right to rule, but it also gives us responsibilities over the ruled. We must stress this point. It will be the foundation stone upon which we build. Where we are opposed, as we surely will be, this must be the basis of all our counter-arguments. We seize control for the greater good, and from this it follows that where we meet resistance, we must use only the force that is necessary and no more. This was your mistake at Durmstrang, but I do not complain, because if you had not been expelled, we would never have met. Albus.
This letter is significant because it shows that Dumbledore did indeed have ideals about wizard dominance, and also, as Hermione later explains to Harry, for the greater good would later become Grindelwald's slogan and his justification for all of his actions.
For the greater good. For the greater good.
It seems Dumbledore was the one who gave him that idea. After that letter, Rita talks about how Dumbledore and Grindelwald suddenly fell apart, and it happened right around the time of Ariana's death. Rita doesn't know the details of what happened, but theorizes heavily that Grindelwald may have killed her, especially given how Aberforth blamed Albus for her death.
And how did the mysterious Ariana die? Was she the inadvertent victim of some dark rite? Did she stumble across something she ought not to have done as the two young men sat practicing for their attempt at glory and domination? Is it possible that Ariana Dumbledore was the first person to die for the greater good?
Finally, Rita points out the fact that Dumbledore took his sweet time to finally take action against Grindelwald, despite all the death he was causing, and wonders if it was because he was still clinging to some affection for him. Upon finishing reading that, Harry's spirits, already lower than he could have imagined, finally hit rock bottom, as his faith in Dumbledore evaporates. Hermione is also shocked by what she read, especially Dumbledore having helped Grindelwald rise to power. However, she does remind Harry that it is Rita Skeeter writing this, which is an important point. As we later learn, pretty much everything she said in here is true, but it's deliberately worded in ways to paint Dumbledore in the worst light possible. Plus, a lot of her dark theories about the things she doesn't know turn out to be wrong. Hermione also reminds Harry that Dumbledore was really young at the time this happened, to which Harry responds that he was the same age as they are now, and they're doing everything they can to fight the dark arts.
He changed, Harry. He changed. It's as simple as that. Maybe he did believe these things when he was 17, but the whole rest of his life was devoted to fighting the dark arts. Dumbledore was the one who stopped Grindelwald, the one who always voted for Muggle protection and Muggle-born rights, who fought you-know-who from the start and who died trying to bring him down. Harry, I'm sorry, but I think the real reason you're so angry is that Dumbledore never told you any of this himself.
Maybe I am. Look what he asked from me, Hermione. Risk your life, Harry, and again, and don't expect me to explain everything. Just trust me blindly. Trust that I know what I'm doing. Trust me even though I don't trust you. Never the whole truth. Never. He loved you. I know he loved you. I don't know who he loved, Hermione, but it was never me. This isn't love, the mess he's left me in. He shared a damn sight more with Gellert Grindelwald than he ever shared with me. I've already said how disappointed I am that the movie left out Dumbledore's past, as I think it's really interesting and makes the character a lot more three-dimensional. In addition to that, however, I also like seeing Harry having to struggle with the fact that Dumbledore wasn't necessarily the embodiment of pure goodness like he believed. One of the things Harry has always struggled with is changing his perspective on people. Now he's being forced to do so with Dumbledore, and later will do the same in the opposite direction with Snape. It's also a good story point for this particular moment, as it brings Harry decisively to his lowest point. He's lost Ron, he's lost his wand, he has no idea where to go, and now he's lost his faith in Dumbledore. Things look about as bleak as they possibly could, which is why what happens next is so significant.